The crystalline dome of the grand chamber shimmered as light refracted through its many-faceted walls, casting shifting patterns across the delegates seated in tiers of gleaming stone. To an untrained eye, it might appear beautiful, inspiring even, but to me it was simply the familiar theater of power where lesser species gathered to hear the pronouncements of their betters. I, of course, counted myself among the latter. I am Valor Antiquaire, senior envoy of the Valen Directorate, speaker for an empire that had stood unchallenged for millennia. When I took my seat at the high dais overlooking the floor, I did so with the confidence of one who believed history itself bent in his direction. And then there were the humans. They sat low, as was fitting, in the petitioner's row. Their representatives were fragile creatures, their physiology unsuited for the grandeur of space. Their limbs appeared soft, their postures unimpressive. It astonished me that such beings had made it to the chamber at all, let alone requested recognition as a sovereign species within the Galactic Council. Most newcomers understood their place, to beg for inclusion, to accept conditions, to thank us for our mercy. Yet the humans sat with an unsettling calm, as though they did not grasp the gravity of their situation. I surveyed them with practiced disdain. Their clothing was modest compared to the ceremonial garb of the council members. No jewels, no metallic threads, not even the faint shimmer of protective nanoweave. The woman at their head, Trade Minister Calloway, I believe, had her hair pulled back in a style so simple it bordered on insulting. This was our stage, and she had not bothered to dress for the performance. A smile touched her lips, light and infuriating, as though she found amusement in the solemnity of our assembly. The arbiter began the proceedings with the usual pomp. His voice reverberated through the chamber as he recited charges against humanity: reckless expansion into contested sectors, unauthorized mining of protected worlds, violation of interstellar trade protocols. He spoke of balance disrupted, of order threatened, of traditions flouted by a species that had not earned its place. Each accusation was met with murmurs of approval from the gathered delegates, their feathers, tendrils, or antennae shifting in displays of satisfaction. I admit, I joined them eagerly. It felt good to see the upstart creatures brought low, to hear their misdeeds laid out like evidence before a tribunal. When the arbiter declared the verdict, it came as no surprise. The council voted overwhelmingly to deny humanity full recognition. Not only that, but sanctions were imposed, trade restrictions, embargoes, a ban on their ships entering key systems. It was the kind of ruling that had crippled dozens of species before them. The humans would either submit or collapse. History had shown there was no third path. I leaned back in my chair, savoring the moment, already composing the speech I would deliver to my people about how we had defended the galaxy from chaos. Yet the humans did not react as expected. No outcry, no desperate pleas for reconsideration. The chamber braced for protest, but instead the woman at their head rose gracefully, inclined her head toward the arbiter, and spoke in a tone so measured it unsettled me. "We thank the council for its careful consideration," she said. Her words were plain, but her delivery carried no trace of defeat. "We accept your decision." She smiled again, that same infuriating smile. Then, without fanfare, she turned and walked out, her companions following in unhurried step. No one barred their path. No one quite knew how to respond. By the time the great doors closed behind them, the chamber was filled with a silence more deafening than any outrage could have been. The delegates exchanged glances, confusion flickering in eyes, and expressions not accustomed to uncertainty. The Drachthi clicked their mandibles in irritation. The Kelran hissed among themselves. I forced a laugh, sharp and dismissive, to break the tension. "Primitive bravado," I declared loudly, my voice echoing. "They do not understand what has happened. In time they will." Others nodded, seizing on my words like a lifeline. The illusion of control had to be maintained, after all. And yet, even as the chamber moved on to other business, I found myself replaying the moment in my mind. That smile lingered like a shadow across my thoughts. It was not the smile of the defeated, nor even of the defiant. It was something else, calm, assured, almost mocking. The humans had accepted their humiliation with a composure that felt less like ignorance and more like preparation. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself that I, Valor, envoy of an empire older than their species, was reading too much into the expression of a fragile creature who would soon be forgotten. And yet, as I left the chamber that day, the memory of that smile clung to me. It followed me through the grand halls, into the corridors of power, and into the quiet of my private quarters. I could not shake it. In all my years at the council, I had witnessed countless defeats. Species came and went, some humbled, others erased. None had ever smiled. None had ever looked upon the weight of galactic judgment and responded with anything but outrage or despair. The humans had done both less and more. They had thanked us. I dismissed the thought with irritation, poured myself a glass of aged liquor, and raised a toast to our victory. But even as the liquid burned down my throat, unease smoldered beneath the triumph. I told myself it was imagination, nothing more. Still, in the privacy of my mind, a question whispered with the persistence of a wound that refused to heal. What if the smile meant something? I remember the celebrations that followed the verdict as vividly as I remember my own hatching day. The council chambers emptied into the streets of the capital, and every district erupted in festivals. My fellow ambassadors clinked glasses of luminous wine and boasted of the humans' imminent collapse. We had, as they so proudly phrased it, caged the apes. I too joined the revelry, telling anyone who would listen that within a cycle their colonies would be begging for scraps, their ships mortgaged to creditors, their dream of the stars reduced to dust. It was a rare thing to see so many rival empires united in joy, and I allowed myself the indulgence of certainty. But certainty has a way of unraveling. The first threads came in the form of minor reports, dispatches from fringe systems that should never have warranted the attention of a high chancellor. A Kelran merchant complained that one of his contracts had been undercut by human traders. A Drakthi convoy returned from the frontier grumbling that their goods had been displaced by cheaper alternatives. At first I dismissed these whispers as anomalies, the desperate flailing of species too stubborn to accept its decline. Yet the reports grew more frequent, and their tone shifted from irritation to unease. I requested an audit, more to silence my curiosity than from genuine concern. When the data arrived, I found myself staring at numbers that did not make sense. Human ships, despite being barred from sanctioned networks, were appearing in system after system, their holds full, their ledgers balanced. They had no access to our licensed markets, yet their trade seemed not diminished but thriving. The council had cut off their arteries, and somehow they had grown new ones overnight. I laughed, of course. What else was I to do? Plastic ships and childish tricks, I told my aides. Let them scamper about the edges. Their efforts are the death throes of a species already condemned. I delivered the line with enough conviction that my subordinates chuckled, though I noticed their eyes lingered a moment too long on the charts before turning away. Weeks passed, and the stories became harder to ignore. Minor civilizations, those we had long relegated to dependency, began shifting their trade routes. They claimed human goods arrived faster, cost less, and were curiously more reliable than our own. When I demanded proof, they provided manifests with human stamps, contracts signed in neat script, records verified by systems that should not have existed outside our oversight. I tried to assure myself this was merely the chaos of free markets, the usual turbulence after sanctions. Yet deep within I felt the first sting of dread. The humans were not flailing. They were building. Quietly, patiently, they were weaving a network beyond our sight, a parallel economy that did not rely on our permission or our enforcement. It was not defiance born of desperation. It was strategy. The woman from the chamber haunted me. I saw her face in my dreams, that calm smile hovering at the edge of memory. I had thought it arrogance, the empty bravado of prey, too foolish to know it had been cornered. Now I wondered if it had been something else, an admission that the council's ruling had been anticipated, accounted for, perhaps even welcomed. I spoke of these suspicions to my peers, though cautiously, for fear of appearing paranoid. They laughed. The Drakthi ambassador clacked his mandibles, declaring the humans' tricks unsustainable. The Kelran emissary hissed that human trade was a temporary novelty, a fad soon to collapse under its own weight. Even among my own people, the prevailing opinion was that I worried too much. They are resourceful little mammals, one colleague told me. But resourcefulness is not power. Yet the unease refused to release me. Each new report added weight to my doubts. Colonies that should have starved were expanding. Fleets that should have rusted were building new hulls. Technology that should have stagnated was advancing in ways we could not quite trace. Every sanction, every barrier, every punishment the Council had designed to break them seemed instead to redirect their energy, as though resistance itself fueled their growth. One evening, unable to sleep, I accessed restricted archives to trace the movement of goods across the sectors. What I saw chilled me. The humans had not only created alternatives to our routes, they had optimized them. Their ships traveled faster not because they were stronger, but because their navigational algorithms mapped shortcuts we had overlooked. Their goods cost less not because they cut corners, but because they had streamlined manufacturing techniques our bureaucracies were too bloated to attempt. Where we had grown complacent, they had grown ingenious. I remember my own words in the chamber, my boast that we had clipped their wings before they learned to fly. Now it seemed they had not only taken flight, but charted skies we had never considered. I felt, for the first time in my long service, a hollow knot in my chest that I recognized as fear. Still, I told myself it was not too late. The Council would act. It always did. A coalition of empires could easily crush a fledgling network if only the will was summoned. Yet when I proposed urgent sanctions to my colleagues, I was met with indifference. Why give them the honor of our attention? One ambassador scoffed. We would only validate their efforts. Their laughter rang in my ears long after the meeting ended. I could not join it. I could not dismiss the quiet certainty that grew stronger with each passing day. We had not defeated the humans. We had provoked them. The irony bit deeper than I could admit aloud. We had meant to cage the apes, but all we had done was force them to climb higher, faster, and smarter. And as I stared at the silent stars beyond the Council dome, I wondered, not for the first time, what game they were truly playing, and how long before we realized we had been the prey all along. The Council could no longer ignore the reports. By the third cycle after the sanctions, it had become impossible to dismiss the humans' activities as coincidence or novelty. Their parallel networks were no longer small tributaries at the edge of galactic commerce. They were rivers carving canyons through our carefully maintained order. At last, measures were proposed, debated, and ratified. I was there when the proclamation was delivered. Heavier sanctions, enforced embargoes, a declaration that any civilization found trading with humans would be penalized. It sounded decisive, strong. It sounded like victory. For a few brief weeks, I almost believed it would work. Fleets were dispatched to patrol the contested sectors. Inspectors were authorized to seize human goods wherever they appeared. Rumors circulated of Council blockades forming around key worlds. I let myself imagine that the apes would finally understand their folly and bow, as all upstarts eventually did. But the universe does not bend to our expectations, no matter how old or powerful we imagine ourselves to be. The embargoes failed before they began. The smaller civilizations, the very ones we had expected to cower under threat, flocked to the humans with unprecedented eagerness. They claimed the humans offered fairer contracts, predictable schedules, and technologies designed not to exploit but to assist. More damning still, they argued that life under human systems was better, simpler, freer, even dignified. I heard a Thren ambassador declare, without irony, that he would rather risk Council wrath and return to our tangled bureaucracies. The chamber erupted in outrage, but I felt my stomach twist. The military effort fared no better. Our fleets, vast and gleaming, were deployed to choke human trade routes. Yet the humans did not fight us directly. They did not send squadrons to challenge our superiority. Instead, their ships disappeared into shadows, navigating lanes our charts did not recognize. Convoys meant to be cornered simply arrived at destinations, as though they had passed through walls. Worse still, our blockades began to falter from within. Systems froze, sensors blinked out, communications collapsed into static. Only later did we discover that human maintenance packages had somehow infiltrated our systems. With a flick of code, they could disable weapons, reroute coordinates, even lock entire ships in orbit. I recall standing before a display as an entire blockade fleet drifted helplessly, powerless to move, their systems blinking error codes while human freighters glided past unharmed. My colleagues raged, demanding sabotage investigations. But the truth was simpler and more humiliating. Our fleets had accepted human software updates. The apes had not outgunned us. They had outthought us. Meanwhile, defections began, not just among minor allies, but among our own. Citizens, workers, even aides whispered of opportunities in human space. They claimed wages were higher, technology more accessible, housing affordable. I confronted one of my junior assistants after discovering she had filed an immigration petition. She looked me in the eyes, steady, unafraid, and told me she wanted her children to grow up somewhere with hope. I dismissed her with scorn, but her words lingered long after she had gone. Every day the chamber grew quieter, its once triumphant voices replaced with nervous whispers. Reports arrived of colonies shifting allegiance, of trade hubs electing to operate under human law, and still the humans had not fired a single shot. They had not conquered territory. They had not raised banners over fallen citadels. They had simply built something better, and the galaxy was choosing it over us. I began to dread entering the chamber. Where once I had delivered speeches with confidence, now I found myself watching every human success with mounting dread. My colleagues still postured, still spat venom, but I could see the fear in their eyes. Each new decree we issued, each retaliation we attempted, seemed only to tighten the noose around our own necks. I remember the night it finally broke me. A private gathering of ambassadors had been called, ostensibly to discuss strategy. In truth, it was a council of desperation. Voices were raised, accusations hurled, alliances threatened. Some demanded full military invasion of Earth. Others insisted we ignore the humans and hope their network collapsed on its own. I listened to them bicker, ancient empires clawing at each other like frightened hatchlings, and I realized the truth. It was too late. We had lost without even understanding how. The phrase came unbidden to my mind. They are not fighting us. They are replacing us. I cannot shake it. Every policy, every reaction we made only accelerated the process. Where we imposed sanctions, others turned to humans for relief. Where we sent fleets, humans offered repairs. Where we imposed order, humans offered choice. It was not conquest. It was erosion, relentless and quiet, until the ground beneath us was gone. I returned to my quarters that night and sat in silence. My reflection in the mirror looked older, wearier, my spines dulled with fatigue. I tried to summon my old arrogance, to tell myself that Valens had outlasted crises before. Yet I knew this was different. This was not a storm to be weathered. This was a tide rising, and we were already drowning. The image of the human woman from the trial returned to me with merciless clarity. That calm bow, that faint smile. She had known. They had been ready for this all along. What we had thought of as a verdict had been nothing more than the opening move of a game we never realized we were playing. I poured a glass of wine and let it sit untouched on the table, staring at the stars beyond the window. For the first time in my career, I did not know what would come next. I only knew that whatever it was, it would not be decided by us. The council chamber no longer glitters the way it once did. The crystalline dome still refracts light into colors, but the vibrancy is gone, dulled by tension that hangs in the air like a storm about to break. Delegates no longer arrive in grand procession. They slink to their seats, avoiding each other's eyes, their voices hushed, their postures defensive. The chamber that once echoed with laughter at humanity's expense now trembles under the weight of a truth none of us want to admit. The humans have won. The treasury lies empty. Our fleets, though vast, are paralyzed by software they no longer trust. Citizens abandon our colonies in droves, their migration paths like rivers flowing inevitably toward human-controlled space. Entire economies have collapsed in the shadow of a parallel system, one that thrives with efficiency we never imagined possible. And worst of all, our people are happy there. They do not speak of survival. They speak of opportunity, of dignity, of futures brighter than anything our ancient empires promised. I sit in my seat, high above the floor, and watch the others unravel. The Drakthi ambassador pounds his claws against the table, insisting on military escalation, though his fleets have already been humiliated. The Kelran emissary hisses of conspiracies and sabotage, yet cannot deny that half his colonies now trade exclusively in human credits. Every suggestion collapses into shouting, every solution into recrimination. I remain silent, because I no longer believe there is a solution. The chamber doors open, and the humans return. It is not with fleets or weapons or demands. It is with poise, calm, and steady, as though they are guests returning to a dinner invitation rather than victors entering the hall of their defeated adversaries. The same woman leads them, her hair pinned neatly, her stride measured. When she stands at the center table, silence falls. "We are here to offer terms," she says. Her voice is clear, not triumphant, not cruel, simply steady, as though the outcome had been obvious from the beginning. "We will not conquer. We will not demand reparations. We will only extend an invitation. Join us, or be left behind." The words hang in the chamber with more force than any weapon. My peers sputter, rage, protest. Yet their voices sound weak, hollow. The truth is written on every face in the hall. Their people are already gone. Their economies already aligned with human systems. Their authority already meaningless. Resistance is nothing but theater. The Drakthi slam their mandibles, demanding defiance. Yet even as they speak, a messenger delivers a datapad to their leader, who pales upon reading it. Entire colonies of Drakthi citizens have voted to apply for human governance. The Kelran hiss in fury, only to learn their own border worlds have signed trade pacts with Earth. Every protest is punctured by reality before the sentence can finish. I remain still, watching the scene unfold with a strange detachment. Once, I would have shouted with the loudest, demanded humanity be crushed beneath our fleets. Now I understand the futility. The humans have not overpowered us. They have rendered us obsolete. They did not tear down our structures. They built something better beside them, and the galaxy chose. The woman looks around the chamber. Her eyes rest on me for a fraction longer than anyone else's, as if she remembers my speeches, my contempt, my certainty that her people would fail. She does not smile this time, but there is no need. The memory of that first smile is enough. Slowly, inevitably, the voice is quiet. Pride falters before the weight of inevitability. One by one, the ambassadors bow their heads. Not in agreement, not in allegiance, but in resignation. The invitation has already been accepted by their people. To refuse now is to consign themselves to irrelevance. Applications for Earth citizenship begin that same week. Entire empires, once proud and immovable, quietly submit to human-led systems. Some cloak it as strategic partnership, others as temporary alignment. But we all know what it is: surrender dressed in bureaucratic finery. As for me, I no longer deliver grand speeches from the dais. My new title is Trade Liaison, assigned to oversee the transition of Valen commerce into human networks. In practice, I am little more than a clerk, stamping approvals on contracts written by human hands. The chamber that once echoed with my proclamations now ignores me. And yet, to my shame, I find the work tolerable. The humans are infuriatingly efficient. Their systems run smoothly. Their contracts are transparent. Their bureaucracy, though unfamiliar, is astonishingly free of corruption. For the first time in my career, the ledgers balance without manipulation. The trade routes run without endless disputes. I cannot deny the relief this brings, even as it gnaws at my pride. Sometimes I catch myself wondering if this is what they intended all along. Not conquest, not domination, but replacement through competence. They did not force us to kneel. They built a system where standing alone became impossible. We chained them, or so we thought. It was we who lined up for their collars, and found them lighter than our crowns. Now, when I look back on that chamber where the verdict was first delivered, I see not the triumph of an empire, but the moment its decline began. I hear again the arbiter's words, the sanctions so confidently proclaimed, and I see the calm smile of a human woman who knew better. We thought we had ended them. In truth, we had only accelerated their rise. I pour myself another glass of wine at my modest desk, staring at the stars through a window no longer mine to command. Somewhere out there, the humans expand still, not through conquest but through invitation, and the galaxy follows willingly. I cannot help but feel the irony settle upon me like a final, quiet verdict. We sought to chain the apes, but in the end, it was they who freed us from our illusions of power. And the bitter truth I carry alone is this: I almost admire them for it.